Passage 1, The Case for Banning Guns. From October 6, 2017 for TheWeek.com. Whenever America has one of its periodic mass shootings, you can count on seeing this particular exchange played out on cable news and in conversations across the country. The advocates for guns will say to the promoter of restrictions, "You just want to ban all guns," to which it is, "No, I don't. I just want some common sense regulation." In anticipation of this criticism, Democratic politicians will regularly begin their remarks on gun control by saying, "I support the Second Amendment, and I'm not trying to ban guns, I just believe. But since no one else wants to say it, I will. Yes, I'd like to ban guns. Almost all of them, at least the ones in private people's hands." Now, before you begin writing your angry, threatening email to me, and just so you know, you won't be the first or even the 100th to communicate your friendly sentiments, let me be completely clear about what I'm saying. First and most important, I know that guns are not going to be banned. And I know that with around 300 million of them already in circulation, collecting them would be an impossible task, even if we tried, which we won't. I'm also fully aware of the Second Amendment and how the Supreme Court decided for the first time in 2008 that it does confer an individual's right to own a gun. This isn't a realistic proposal for legislation. At times, however, it's worthwhile to step back from these concrete debates we're having, as important as they are, and spend a moment contemplating what type of society we'd prefer if there were no practical impediments to radical change. If we could snap our fingers and create a situation we wanted to start over, what would we do? I'd suggest that if we were able to do that, we'd be much better off if we abandoned the absurd fetishism around guns that leaves us awash in so much blood and gore. America would simply be safer if we constructed our gun laws like ones in our peer countries like Europe and Asia. In those countries, private gun ownership is relatively rare, and it's very strictly regulated. To gun owners, let me make something else clear. I get it. I get that the hunting rifle your grandfather passed down to you gives you a strong and meaningful connection to him. I get that guns are fun and that just holding one, let alone firing it, can give you an intoxicating feeling of power and potency. I get that tricking out your guns with all kinds of cool accessories and reading about them and talking about them and thinking about them is all hugely enjoyable for you. I'm a gearhead too, just about different hobbies. I'll even grant that maybe you're one of the responsible ones and that you take safety seriously and that it burns you up that people who are less careful than you give gun owners a bad name. But no matter how trustworthy you might be, you have to reckon with the price we all pay for the things that you enjoy. Over 30,000 Americans dead every year, and tens of thousands more injured and paralyzed. Can you imagine how many restrictions on our rights we'd welcome if terrorists were killing 30,000 of us a year? Oh, but you say, society has to pay that price because this isn't just a hobby, it's my family's safety. Would you deprive people of the ability to defend themselves even in their own homes? Well, if we're imagining what it'd be like to start over, then yes, I would. You wouldn't be able to shoot an intruder because they probably wouldn't have a gun either. We don't have to imagine the horror such a society would produce because we have examples all over the world. Do you think defensive homeowners in English or Japan or Singapore have to fend off a daily stream of home invaders breaking their doors down with homicide in mind? No, they don't. They have crime, even murders. What they don't have is the kind of body count that we have here in the U.S. It's not because Americans are just more violent people. It's because guns are so easily available to us. Yet, many on the political right continue to make this ludicrous argument that even if you took away everyone's guns, people would still have evil in their hearts, and if they really wanted to kill, they'd find a way. Senator John Thune recently suggested that instead of passing restrictions on guns, people are going to have to take steps in their own lives to take precautions. And if you find yourself in a mass shooting, you should get small to make yourself less of a target. It's like the weather. It's not like you can do anything about it, right? But the fact is that it's easier it is to get guns, the easier it is to kill many, many people. Take just one vivid example. On December 14th, 2012, the very same day that Adam Lanza murdered 20 children at Sandy Hook Elementary School, a man named Min Young Jun entered Chenapeg Village Primary School in China with an equally murderous intent. He attacked 23 children, but since he was only wielding a knife instead of a gun, every one of those children survived. Imagine if you could save all those lives, the 11,000 to 12,000 homicide victims, and the 20,000 gun suicides we have every year. A number of researchers tell us that it'd be far smaller if the means to easily contemplate a suicide wasn't so available. Imagine if we didn't have to pay the billions of dollars every year we spend treating gunshot victims in the hospital. Imagine if the police didn't kill 1,000 or so Americans each year, which they do so in part because they're trained to believe that anyone who looks at them funny might be about to shoot them. Imagine if our country could have far much less fear, much less misery, and much less grief. We may not often think about it in these terms, but if you're a gun advocate or a member of the party that supports gun rights, you're saying that all this is the price we have to pay for the joy that some people take in our guns? No other developed country has to pay this price, but we must. So yes, if I have my way, there would be little private ownership of guns, and what there was would be highly regulated with strict requirements on licensing, training, and record keeping. You might be able to get an instrument whose very purpose is to kill, but you'd have to jump through some pretty serious hoops, and there'd be lots of things that could disqualify you from getting that gun, that privilege. You could keep a small number of hunting rifles, but anything else, you'd have to go to the range to use, unless there were some extraordinary circumstances that absolutely demanded you keep a different type of gun in your home. I realize that to some people, that sounds like a nightmare. No matter what legislation we might pass, even in liberal states that have increased restrictions in recent years, we won't get anywhere near banning guns. In particular, we won't address the biggest gun problem we have, which is not mass shootings, but the daily carnage and killing that claims around 90 American lives every day. That means handguns, not military-style rifles or anything like bump stocks. Precisely because we can't start from scratch, all we can do is try to trim around the edges and find ways to reduce the unending slaughter a little bit here and a little bit there. And those things are absolutely worth doing. And there's a compelling reason, if there's a compelling reason, why we shouldn't have universal background checks, or why someone has a constitutional right to a magazine that holds 30 rounds, or a device that turns their semi-automatic rifle into an automatic one. I've yet to hear it. Those are the questions we're actually going to debate, and we should. But when you talk to people from other countries about America and guns, you always get the same questions. Are you people crazy? How can you tolerate this? And the answer is that while we might not be crazy, our gun reality is. We might not be able to change the 2 centuries that brought us to where we are, but it wouldn't hurt to imagine something less awful.